tries to get its grounded 737 MAX fleet back in the air. The company says some of its 737, including many of the MAX planes, may have faulty parts on their wings that could fail prematurely or even crack. Here's the part. It's known as a leading edge slat track. Leading edge slat track. U.S. aviation officials say a plane could be damaged in flight if that fails. Airlines have been ordered to inspect and repair it within 10 days. The 737 MAX was grounded worldwide after 2 deadly crashes in less than 5 months. Let's bring in CNN safety analyst David Susi for his perspective. He's in Denver, Colorado. How dangerous is this, David?
It can be very dangerous. I think the way that it's being handled right now is a good sign of the FAA working with Boeing to make things get done properly. You know, there's so many of these slats. There's 8 slats on each wing, and each of those slats have about 2 and maybe sometimes 3 of these tracks that guide it where it needs to go. So I think they made the right call on this to say it is a safety critical issue, but it's not going to cause an aircraft to come out flying out of the sky.
Right. So the FAA says that if this part failed, it wouldn't bring down the plane. You're confirming that you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I do agree with that. I think they're making the right call on this one.
Look, I have to say, when I read that, I wasn't very reassured, given Boeing's recent history, the crash of the 2 737 MAX 8s, given that at the time Boeing had deemed a software non-critical when in fact it was critical. So now when I'm seeing the FAA say, well, you know, this wouldn't down the plane, I have to say, I just have my doubts.
Yeah, everyone does. I mean, the only reason I'm comfortable with it is because I'm very familiar with that system. Right. I've actually removed and reinstalled those slat tracks before as a mechanic for an airline. And I know what they are, I know what they do, and I know if they fail, it's not going to cause a problem with the flight characteristics of the aircraft. It might slightly, but these are just secondary flight control systems. They're not primary flight control systems, which are the things that were part of the MCAS and the problems that they had with the MAX 8. So I'm not seeing this as something that is safety critical that could bring down an aircraft. I'm really not at this point.
All right, so that's really valuable insight. So we have to just separate these two problems. What is it exactly that we're talking about as a problem? Apparently, Boeing employees found that this particular batch of slats coming to them from a supplier hadn't been heat tested.
Yeah, so what happens on this is that the materials are made in one place, and then they may be heat treated to allow them to not crack or to be able to be flexible, however the metal needs to be. And so that's part of the process. So if a piece of that process falls out, like I said before, this is actually a good sign that the system is working. When they see something like this, they bring it to identify the issue. It goes to the FAA, and the FAA does that. It's not hidden under a delegation authority or anything like that. It's part of the way the system works. It's a bit like looking into the sausage factory to see how they make sausages, but this is the right way to go.
Well, with your sausage analogy, then how do you find the sausages that potentially have defects now that they're, you know, out on these 737s that airlines have around the world? How do you actually locate the parts?
Well, what they do right now is each one of these parts is serialized, so they're looking out to see which serial numbers were installed on which aircraft. So that is tracked. It's part of it, because it is a part of the aircraft that has to be replaced over time. So they do have systems to keep track of where they are. I'm a bit concerned about the fact they don't know exactly where they are and exactly what aircraft. That should be faster than this. But the fact that they've given them 10 days to come up with it, I think that tells me that they've actually know where these parts are. They're going to do an inspection on the parts. Now, they said 10 days, but they're going to inspect each of these items first, too, to see if there are cracks in them. And if there are cracks, they'll be removed from service immediately.
All right, David Susi, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for your insights. Still to come, shock after Friday's mass shooting in the U.S. state of Virginia, where many of the gunman's longtime colleagues say there were no signs something like this would happen. We'll bring you an update on the investigation. Plus, this in Italy. A cruise ship comes barreling into a port.